Mark Carney has officially apologized to Donald Trump. Maybe this will help us out in the US-Canada trade negotiations. Speaking of which, when it comes to trade, we know Mark Carney likes to under-deliver, and we're seeing that coming out of the Asia trip he was just on, especially with some new tariffs getting placed on Canada. Things are not looking good, and we just got some new economic numbers updated for Canada. It seems like the contraction was worse than we thought, but luckily Canada's largest general is there to fight for Canada and focus on the most important things. We actually have some hilarious rumors about her today. Shout out to the Americans for that. And then we have some back-to-back stories on the mainstream media, either misconstruing, some might say lying, especially when we have some new footage of the foreign entrepreneurs doing exactly what they do best, showing Canadians how to fix every problem. But we do have a really interesting clip at the end of the video, a theory of how we ended up in the situation that we are, both in Canada and the US. It actually covers a lot of things. It was really interesting. There's a lot to talk about in today's video, so let's get into it.
Visit to China, Prime Minister, you alluded to an invitation.
An invitation has been extended, and
How many times does this guy stutter? Keep in mind his stutter there. Keep in mind his speech pattern and how he opens every conference, because it will matter.
I indicated that I look forward to accepting that invitation, yes.
For the first time since 2017, the Canadian Prime Minister and Chinese President have sat down for a meeting, with Mark Carney and Xi Jinping meeting here in South Korea on the sidelines of the APEC summit. It lasted for about 30 minutes. The media was in at the beginning for opening remarks. Mr. Carney talked about the idea that
the meeting lasted 30 minutes. Canada and China have not met for 8 years. We've seen how Carney talks in his meetings. Mr. President Xi, I just want to thank you for taking the time to meet and discuss. It's like, how much could he have accomplished? How much could he have actually said in about a 30-minute meeting after not meeting for 8 years, when you know both sides would have been doing their political greetings and it would have been done through translators? They probably talked about 4 freaking things, maybe if that.
Distance does not solve problems, and there have been a lot of problems when it comes to Canada-China relations. Go back to Meng Wanzhou and the two Michaels, and of course there has been alleged foreign interference by the Chinese government in Canadian elections. That is very much
alleged, has been proven,
soured the relations between the two countries, but it seems like both sides are willing to bury the hatchet on that. Xi Jinping complimenting Mark Carney on winning the election this year, but also talking about the idea that they're hoping to move forward at the earliest opportunity to reestablish and reset Canadian relations, to move past the issues that the two sides have had for this period of time here. There is a big difference, though, between this meeting today between Xi and Carney and the meeting that happened yesterday between Xi and Donald Trump. There was a lot of progress made on the China-U.S. relations. Of course, Trump dropping the tariffs from 20% to 10% on some goods in China. That is, of course, different than with Canada, where there has been only tariff movement. On the upside, increasing tariffs on Canada from the Trump perspective.
Not only increased tariffs from the Trump perspective, we got increased tariffs from India. Mark Carney did his best to under-promise this meeting and still somehow under-delivered with accomplishing nothing.
There was no movement today on key tariffs like canola, which has been very punishing for Canadian farmers, and also no changes on Chinese electric vehicle tariffs. That is at 100%, has been a major irritant for the Chinese. A readout from the Prime Minister's office saying that they are focusing on both sides to try and deal with these issues, sending their officials to try and fix that. That will be the key topic of conversation going forward when it comes to Canada-China relations.
People hate when I say it, and don't get me wrong, I will never buy a Chinese EV in no capacity. I wouldn't even take one for free. Literally, I would not. But the fact is, Canada's auto sector is probably cooked, and we're not going to be able to pivot into manufacturing EVs in any meaningful way that will ever take on China. And the risk of Canada doubling down on being an EV manufacturer, and all it would take is every country just be like, yeah, we're not going to tariff China's EVs anymore, and then Canada would be cooked. Canada needs to be pivoting to where our natural strengths are. Like I've said in other videos, we're probably losing Toyota. Speaking of China and Toyota, Toyota has nothing to do with this story, but Japan does. But this story came out today. It's from Sam Cooper. We've talked about him a few times on the channel. He is an investigative journalist, and he's constantly calling out the real stories. And his story is the leader of the Chinese chamber linked to RCMP police station probe was sought by Japan for a triple unaliving, questioning tied to synthetic fun powder investigations. Getting into his new article here was insane. Basically, there's a Chinese citizen pretending to be Japanese who's now helping to run grocery stores in Canada, which is the same thing that he used for all of his smuggling when he was in Japan that led to this. It's crazy. And he even references the Chinese police stations that are currently on Canadian soil that people just want to move on from, that there are Chinese police stations in Canada right now. But you guys should read this story after the video. It's actually really interesting. Speaking of tariffs and trade negotiations, Saskatchewan, basically Canada just got hit again. We're getting crushed. But something really important was said here, especially when it comes to all of Carney's plans to double trade away from the United States.
Premier Scott Moe is urging Ottawa to pressure the Indian government after it dropped new tariffs on yellow peas, saying the move threatens a key market for Saskatchewan producers. In a letter to the Federal Minister of Agriculture and Minister of International Trade, Moe calling India's tariff announcement very concerning, expressing the need for Saskatchewan producers and exporters to have certainty as the province still deals with Chinese tariffs on canola products. Collectively, the Indian and Chinese markets make up 71% of Saskatchewan's pea exports, with $480 million being shipped to India last year alone.
It wasn't long ago we actually had been talking to the High Commissioner of India and hadn't really given an indication. However, we have seen this before, so this is not entirely new.
We have seen this before. This is not entirely new. Put a pin in that.
To us, to the pea industry, to Canada, there's a number of issues at play with the Indian government there. So, unfortunately, we have dealt with this before.
Now, Saskatchewan officials from the Ministry of Trade and Export Development will be in India next week. The tariffs come as harvest in the province is nearing 99% completion with all that crop in the bin there. The province says yields and quality are above average this year, but more rain and snow is needed to restore soil moisture.
Mark Carney and his squad keep talking about how Canada is going to double its exports to non-US countries to $300 billion. And somehow liberal Canadians keep slurping that up as if that's a reality, as if that's something that exists within the realm of possibility. It doesn't. There's a global economy with countries competing for business. It's not like you just go, okay, well, we're not going to deal with the US anymore. That just means we are entitled to business in these other markets. In these other markets, you have to compete with their domestic manufacturing, also China, also other countries that supply different products to all of these other markets. So the idea that Canada somehow has the competitive advantage in manufacturing and production, the only thing that we do have advantages in, like resources, agriculture, lumber, and other things, Mark Carney keeps cracking down on with carbon taxes and other regulations, making it harder for them to do business. The liberal dunderheads are selling a lie that just can't happen, and that's probably why, even though Trump's saying Canada trade talks won't resume, that we got this confirmation here. US President Donald Trump said he received an apology from Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney over a television ad that opposed tariffs. And Trump is suggesting that trade talks between the two countries won't restart, but said he has a very good relationship with Carney. Interesting. U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright said the goal is for the U.S. and Canada to return to the table and cooperate more closely on oil and gas and critical minerals. It's good that politicians want these conversations to start happening. It's good that allegedly Mark Carney apologized. Hopefully we can make that water under the fridge, especially with this new information that's coming out that CN Rail lays off some 400 managers as tariffs take a bite out of shipping volumes. Those 400 jobs working for CN Rail would most likely be over $100,000 a year, not only devastating to the household who's involved with it, but also to their communities that they're in and to the economy at large when we are losing more jobs, especially since we just got the August GDP numbers and it was only 0.3%, which was lower than they originally were projecting. But here's the update. Canadian National Railway Company is laying off 400 managers as tariffs imposed by the US and Canada take a toll on freight traffic. The cuts affect more than 6% of the company's non-unionized workforce. CN spokeswoman Ashley Mikunowski said that Montreal-based company has been adjusting its unionized and management headcount across Canada and the US to reflect the business environment. Steep sectoral tariffs on steel, aluminum, auto, and lumber imports by the US, President Donald Trump, have dented CN shipping volumes with year-over-year traffic down in the spring and early summer. Oh, what's this? Looks like we've got the liberal cringe alarm. Looks like we get to focus on Canada's top general, who looks like a real strong, independent woman. Got some hilarious rumors about her battlefield behavior, but let's get into her really important statement and show how strong of a leader she is.
Systemic racism, racial discrimination, and harassment are an affront to these values, and yet we allowed these injustices to occur and fester within our ranks. Therefore, on behalf of the Canadian Armed Forces, I offer my most sincere and deepest apologies. I apologize to every CAF member, veteran who experienced racism, discrimination, and harassment. And I acknowledge we failed you.
Not only is it embarrassing to have an old woman as our top general in Canada, our top general, we have a hilarious update about her battlefield behavior. And again, these are just rumors, and the guys say that in the video, so we gotta say, these are allegations, these are rumors, but shout out to the Americans for this.
Canadian forces.
So these are, of course, rumors, but we want to give our audience an insight into what exactly those rumors are. Of course, we don't have evidence, and as you say, it's based on rumor intelligence. But when you talk about these rumors circulating around her leadership, can you explain in more detail what members are saying?
Well, I mean, not to pull any punches, but she cut and run while she was in charge of the mission in Iraq. Like, I'm currently wearing the shirt, which is Iraqi from Corporal News Network that outlines the ridiculousness of that situation. Now, I wasn't there, but having spoken to folks that were, essentially we're dealing with a general who was in charge of her troops in Iraq, incoming fire. So rockets started to be lobbed into the camp, and she decided to cut and run, call her own evacuation, pack up her carpets. And the only thing that prevented her from getting on the helicopters was another NATO general from the United States, basically dressing her down and telling her to get back into her post.
The allegations are that as soon as there was any sort of actual conflict going on, she tried to leave on her own until an American general dressed her down and said, hey, you can't leave, get back, do your job. But don't worry, the Department of Defense addressed the allegations, and we know we can trust what they say. We got to take all these institutions at face value. We can't question anything.
That to me is a pretty serious allegation, and I just haven't seen it addressed as of yet.
In the interest of fair journalism, True North reached out to the Department of National Defense and General Carney to provide comment to these serious allegations. And in response, this is what a Department of National Defense spokesperson told True North. We are aware of ongoing disinformation stories currently spreading on social media targeting General Jenny Carney and her deployment to Iraq. To set the record straight, these claims are entirely false, baseless, and unfounded, with no credible evidence or reliable sources to support these false allegations.
So shout out to Harrison Faulkner for putting this out here. From the Canada Proud clip here, we did just have her crying on live TV. So assuming she panicked in the battlefield from these rumors doesn't seem that hard to believe. And here we have another mainstream institution, one of Canada's national news stations that we know only brings on experts that would never lie to us and are not wrong. So let's get into it.
Vancouverites have a generally positive outlook on immigration.
Vancouver and the surrounding areas, in fact, may be more welcoming, even in a reduced level, for immigrants to come into the country and particularly into their city. But they don't think that the system is being managed well.
An exclusive poll by Canada Poll.
So it's really funny because this is titled, Vancouver residents have a favorable outlook on immigration. And then in the poll, they're like, hey, yeah, maybe we'd be okay with it, but the program's not going well because, of course, public opinion is falling when it comes to mass immigration, aka Operation Caribom. But we get an expert here who tells us not to believe our own eyes. So here we go.
Pulse Insights for City News shows how the public views the effects of immigration on a tight job market. More than 70% say they think most companies hire foreign workers primarily to lower labor costs rather than to fill genuine shortages. However, Ryan Neely, a partner at McCree Immigration Law, calls that a knee-jerk reaction, saying it's not the way the program works.
Okay, really sit with what he's saying here because we're going to get into something right after he's done talking.
In order for companies to hire foreign nationals, they need to test the Canadian labor market. And they do so at prescribed wage rates that are determined by the federal government. So it is not possible necessarily to undercut the labor market by hiring foreign nationals.
It's not possible to undercut the Canadian labor market by using foreign nationals because they have the requirements that have to be done, right? So it's not possible. As he said, you know, they have to post the wage at $36.80 per hour because that's what they have to market to Canadians. And only if Canadians don't say yes to that, they can offer $36.80 an hour to all the foreign entrepreneurs, because the Canadians, remember, if you wanted to work at KFC for $36 an hour, you can't find a Canadian to do it. However, you can find these foreign entrepreneurs, but for something that expert just told the mainstream news with a straight face is impossible, it seems to be happening a lot. You keep saying that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Ruel Pailan spends his days applying for jobs, dreaming of gaining permanent residency and bringing his family to Canada.
I'm just always thinking for my family, not for myself actually.
Pailan's former employer was Azil Natarajan. His store on the west side of Toronto was approved to hire 34 foreign workers on closed permits, but many left before their work permits expired. Pailan showed CBC his schedule and pay stubs. His contract said he'd get $20 an hour, at least 35 hours a week, but he wasn't scheduled for the hours he expected. His hourly wage was eventually cut by more than $3.
His hourly wage was cut by more than $3, and he wasn't getting the hours that were promised either. Interesting.
Shrinking the money he sent his children in the Philippines for education.
I was crying going to work.
Jean Crescencio also says he was underpaid and he felt the workplace was unhealthy.
Another worker underpaid. Interesting.
He says he came to a tipping point last December.
He was shouting at me that if I don't want to work with him and if I act like that, he will terminate me.
Both men say they quit, a decision made more difficult, Crescencio says, because of their closed work permits.
So basically, these large corporations got to use the temporary foreign worker program to essentially have wage slaves that they undercut and lowered their wages of once they got here, treated poorly because they knew they were stuck as temporary foreign workers. But we just saw the mainstream news told us with their expert that that is impossible, even though this is only one story of dozens that are all across Canada of companies continuing to do this. And by the way, it's not like the Azil Natarajan was a Canadian either. So he was a foreign person using foreign labor to undercut the labor market inside of Canada. So not only were they getting paid less, that money was leaving Canada. So it was double destructive to our economy. But as we know, Canada needs the foreign entrepreneurs from Operation Curry Bomb. So much so that we brought in the best and brightest. And here we have footage of them dumping paint into the river, which as a Canadian, I wouldn't even have considered, but seems like good business.
It's frustrating to watch two men hauling buckets of paint or some other material to the edge of the Nunes Creek ravine before throwing them into the water. The incident happened Monday evening just off of Panorama Drive near the Coquitlam-Port Moody boundary. By Wednesday.
By the way, she called them two men, and nobody addresses that they are foreign entrepreneurs for the whole video.
Wednesday morning, city crews had cleared the buckets, but any spilled material is now making its way downstream toward the Nunes Creek fish hatchery.
It could come down and destroy everything because it was done at night by the look of it. And it could come down here today and find everything dead.
Volunteers say the impact may wipe out years of work and an entire generation of fish.
The pond behind me here has got 8,900 coho fry to be released in May, June next year.
To erase all of that work, an entire generation of fish, and I lived out in that area before, and it wasn't obviously encouraged, but you can drink from the rivers and streams that are coming down the mountains there.
And it could have killed all those, and all the existing coho coming in on the salmon run could have killed all those too.
Even more frustrating, officials say paint and other construction materials can be recycled for free at local stores.
Rona takes recycled paint. There's a recycling place in Kingsway and Port Coquitlam you can get rid of paint.
Oh, did you hear that? They can get rid of it for free. Canada actually has systems in place to make sure that this doesn't happen. But we brought in the foreign entrepreneurs who seem to struggle with the concept of object permanence. Object permanence, if you don't know, is what babies develop over time as they become toddlers to understand that even if they can't see something, it still exists. Somehow, these guys operate under the theory, if I can no longer see it, It doesn't exist. So if I just throw the paint into the water, it disappears and I never have to worry about it again. It's nobody's problem. It's a get out of jail free card. Very smart gentleman. And like I said, for the entire rest of the video, nobody contributes this to immigration at all. And that's how we end up in situations like this, where we're having discussions that this girl brought up. And this is the interesting theory that I was talking about. And she perfectly describes liberal thinking, zero accountability. We have an accountability crisis, and she does a great job with it.
I'm sure you've all seen that graph of what leftists care about versus what conservatives care about, and it's like a scale of people closest to you and people farthest away from you. Like conservatives, when they're polled, tend to care about their family first, then their friends, then their community, then their state, then their country, then the world. And liberals, it's the opposite. They tend to care more about world issues, and then strangers, and then their community, and so on. This is further proof that they're performative. They care about things going on around the world more than they care about their own communities, because fixing your own community is a lot harder than making a post on social media that says Free Palestine. Fixing the issues within your own family is a lot harder than just posting a black...
AKA, it's about accountability. These people don't want any accountability for their own actions. They just want to pretend like they're helping while doing nothing.
Square on Instagram, condemning people for not caring about a war thousands of miles away and acting morally superior and acting like you are the good guy because of it takes maybe 30 seconds out of your day. But dealing with your brokenness inside, or dealing with your broken family, or dealing with your failing friendships, or dealing with your community that's ridden with crime is so much more difficult. They pick the easy way out. They can just virtue signal on TikTok and on Instagram, and they get to feel morally superior when they have disagreements with people about how to fix these larger issues. And then because they do those things, it makes them feel like a good person, and therefore they don't have to fix anything within themselves or within their families or friendships. Because anyone who does anything against them is obviously a bad guy, because they've convinced themselves they're the good guys.
We are watching that happen in real time. Canadians don't want any accountability for how bad Canada has been run for over a decade now. Instead, we want to blame Donald Trump and think we can run away to every other market in the world and we can just get trade deals there and just expand, and Canada's gonna crush and suck at America. You guys don't do anything. No, be real. We have to get a deal with America. Not only that, we should want a deal with America. They are our neighbor. We share the largest land border in the world. They're the largest economy, and Americans, up until 9 months ago, used to love Canadians. They used to see made in Canada and be happy to buy that product, but their attitudes are changing because of Canadian behavior, and it's because Canada lives in a nonsense world where we shut down our productive industries. We have a female general. For some reason, nobody wants to address Operation Curry Bomb, aka mass immigration, as being one of the largest fundamental problems to Canada right now. But if you made it this far in the video, you absolutely rock. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're trying to get these videos out in front of more people. We are trying to grow the channel. If you like what we talk about here, you want to support the channel, you can do it through the link down below. You can also do it directly through YouTube. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.